Welcome to the Bodacious Women in Cannabis podcast, the show where the bold and brilliant women cannabis business leaders share their journey and their expertise. Here's your host, Susan Burns.
Hi, this is your podcast host, Susan Burns. I'm also a lawyer in my day job in the cannabis industry. Nothing delights me more than showcasing bodacious women in cannabis. Today we are talking with Jane Klein, and the current sort of end story is that she's the CEO of Quick American Publishing. But she has a whole, as many people do, a personal story about how she started on this journey and what adds meaning to or punch to her publishing, I guess. So you're really going to enjoy this conversation. What a fascinating person. Welcome, Jane.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yes, just really looking forward to this full-blown conversation here. So you were telling me when we were talking a bit ago, Jane, about that you are now publishing in cannabis and psychedelics, and that's what your publishing company does. But there is a whole reason behind your passion for this industry. Tell us about that.
Well, I've always felt, probably since my first inhalation, that there was no reason to stigmatize cannabis users the way they were, whether you're calling them dirty hippies or, going back to the marijuana being maybe a racial slur. But anyway, there was no reason.
Or arresting Vietnam War veterans.
Exactly. And so there was no reason to stigmatize cannabis users. And I was very fortunate after a series of entrepreneurial ventures in fashion and other marketing positions to have married into the publishing industry through my husband, Ed Rosenthal. And Ed, in addition to being the person that has taught decades of people how to appreciate and grow quality cannabis, was a dedicated crusader who even faced a federal trial when he was arrested implementing the California state laws.
So can you, as a lawyer, I have to confess, my interest is a little bit piqued about the legal issue. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes, it was, it was quite a meaningful time in my life.
And when was this?
This was we're getting into a 20-year anniversary now. This was in 2002, right after Valentine's Day. We had a knock on our door, and my Ed, thinking it was a neighbor in need, went down totally bare and was greeted by FBI, DEA, Treasury Department. And they thought that he was running a big marijuana operation because he was deputized by the city of Oakland to help implement the new state law that had come about in 1996. The California was the first major medical and marijuana law. And he, as this deputy, the city felt he would have some of the immunity that a DEA agent has when they are holding drugs, usually to entrap somebody. But the feds didn't agree with that, and they arrested him. And it turns out that his big operation was a clone factory, that he was basically growing starter plants that then he would, the dispensaries would then sell to patients so they could grow their own. And his federal trial a year later became a real tipping point in what we call the medical marijuana laws, in that the newspapers like the New York Times started to write a piece about Ed, almost being like Billy Budd, where he was actually a positive figure, but the law said he needed to be punished. And this was during Bush-Ashcroft. And as the trial went on, the Times had editorials saying that it was this trial was misguided, and that the war against medical marijuana was misguided and cruel. And if the feds had an issue, they should take it up with the states rather than individuals. So, unfortunately, the judge told the jury that they had to base it on federal law. And also, we could not present any witnesses, like from the city, that had authorized this program. But the jury came back with a guilty verdict. And when they went home and read the newspapers about this being a medical marijuana case and a real trial about California being able to implement its policy, they came out in force and repudiated their verdict.
Wow.
And that went international.
That's amazing.
So it was very, it was a very thing that I'm most proud of as a citizen, and being part of that and standing by my husband, our daughter, who was 12 at the time.
Oh, wow.
They put a microphone in front of her and asked her what she thought, and she said, "My dad is sticking up for sick people. My dad is a hero."
Nice.
And that went out on AM Drive. So we feel that as, that in many ways that we changed the conversation. Medical marijuana was no longer like in quotation marks, medical marijuana. And we know today that we even have very conservative states like Oklahoma having very liberal medical marijuana laws. And of course, we've moved on to, as we mentioned earlier, Minnesota might become the 23rd state to actually have adult use. And, bringing it back to my publishing career, I do feel that the books that we wrote and the distributors that stood by us, that actually we helped people realize that cannabis was not to be stigmatized, that they were a majority in their thinking and in their use. And, and we've seen that in the last, decade or more of people getting out to vote.
Yes, that's true. So now, at the time of the court case and the arrest and case and trial, were you publishing on marijuana or not yet?
No, I had actually stepped in. Ed had been a famous columnist in High Times before the internet, Ask Ed. And it was his column. And so he had published books about marijuana question, Ask Ed, and he had one of the leading cultivation titles at the time.
His own books.
All books. And and then when I came in to run the company, we started producing more books, and Marijuana, the Law and You. In fact, when he was under trial, he had a book, Marijuana, Don't Get Busted, and it talked about things like don't have fights with your girlfriend, and just things how to stay under the reminders, how to stay under the radar, whether it was camouflage or cultivation tips to bring your plants in early. And I remember Barnes and Noble ordering during the trial, ordering about 500 copies of that book, Marijuana.
Nice.
Don't get the irony of it.
So do you publish? Is everything that you publish self-authored, or do you publish for other authors?
No, we publish other authors. We've had several books at the time, medical marijuana. Information books that was written by Dale Geringer, who's the head of California NORML. We had a Medical Marijuana 101 written by somebody who was actually in the industry making edibles. We have cookbooks. We have actually a book now about understanding your CBD THC ratios that was written by a PhD expert in the field. And we actually at one point republished something that the Harvard Press had published Marijuana Reconsidered by Professor Grinspoon, who, this was way back in the, I think it was the late 60s, realized that marijuana was the only thing that was helping his young son get through chemotherapy. So that's been in addition to Ed's books. And then I guess this was about 15 years ago, we took over the publishing of a classic book about psilocybin. Psilocybin Magic Mushroom Grower was written in the 70s by Dennis and Terrence McKenna, two brothers who were just the leaders in understanding not just psilocybin, but the power of plants, a wide range of plants, both medically and psychologically. And at the time, they wrote under a pseudonym. And we were very fortunate when we took over the publishing from the estate. Terrence had passed away. But right before that, Terrence had written a foreword of what he would have liked to have said. And we were able to include these modern words from Terrence in this book. And that's actually surprisingly one of our best sellers, even though it's not, it's a how-to book of how they did it in the 70s, very old and
interesting
things you would never do today, like put a shag carpet, have the jars on shag carpeting.
most people don't know what shag carpeting is anymore.
But now you'd be much more aware of sterilization and clean surfaces.
Yes.
But the ethnobotany in that book and the love for what they were doing, promoting the access to psilocybin, it makes it a very popular little book. And I'm very pleased that we're going to be publishing in the fall a book called Welcome to Psilocybin, which covers, has actually a foreword by Dennis McKenna. And that shows a very easy at-home method of growing your own mushroom stash from somebody who's been teaching a course online, and we feel that in book form we can make it a more permanent record with many more graphics than he produces online. So we're very excited about that.
Very nice. Yeah. So in the when you started publishing about cannabis, was it intended that would be your publishing business model, or were you just using it as a vehicle to disseminate information in the beginning?
I think both, but I think that definitely when Ed was he was his books and he had started the company, it was a dissemination of information, and I saw it more as that could be expanded into a dissemination about the culture. And I mean, if we are a very small publishing company, I know so many books that I could do if we, if we were committed to more staff. There's much more information now about the aroma molecules and which are called terpenes.
Terpenes, yes.
There's a group called gangiers, which I love to promote, with it, like almost like sommeliers about wine.
Yes.
Hopefully.
And the combination of terpenes with different, isomers and
pairings,
all the whole thing. Yes.
How to have a cannabis-based wedding.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, some of that is out there digitally.
Yes.
So, but I think just promoting the community.
Yeah.
I mean, we even have a business book called Branding Bud, the commercialization of cannabis, and it focuses on a lot of the companies and how they've distinguished themselves in their packaging and their branding. And, and of course, I'd love to do a little bit more in the law field. Our mutual friend, Mary Shapiro, puts out wonderful blogs about how to avoid things like canna and green in your trademarks.
Oh my gosh, yes. Do we need any more canna? No.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Great points. So along the way, as you've been publishing and growing your business, would it be a fair characterization to say that your husband's arrest was like one of the major stumbling points in that journey? Or have there been other challenges that you've faced that you've been able to navigate and continue operating?
Well,
challenges come in you can take them many ways, but the most successful people take the challenge and turn it into an opportunity, which it sounds like you did with the trial. But I was wondering if there was something else along the journey, other sticking points that might be instructive for listeners.
Actually, I think the trial was a big boost for us, not just in the book Don't Get Busted, but I go to book signings with Ed, and not necessarily at bookstores, but at like cannabis focused events. We just came back from Spanibus in Spain, and there's the Emerald Cup here in California. And it's so heartwarming to see people come up and want to shake his hand. Sometimes people bring their old books, things that you wouldn't use an old computer book, so you shouldn't be using that old Grow book, but they want him to sign it. So it's very heartwarming for me as first thing as his husband, but also as a publisher, to be part of something that people, some people say this is the first book I read cover to cover. We used to call it in one of my ad campaigns was the Ed Rosenthal Literacy Project.
One way to get people reading.
Yes.
There you go.
Now, of course, our challenges now for all publishers is, who knows what AI will mean, but is certainly with how-to books is YouTube. It's a tool and it's a challenge. And of course, we make sure that, our author and our other Ed and I know our psilocybin authors have some presence, but it's definitely YouTube is the biggest challenge because people can just go there for instant information as compared to investing in a book.
Shorter time frame, because all the shortening of attention spans, which I find myself most frustrating, because I used to love to curl up with books and just read. And now I'm like, after 5 minutes, I'm like, what else can I do? It's very, I have to work on that.
Yeah. And then, the other challenges, we've, I forget what the name of the company was, but credit cards. We sell books. We sell books on the internet. And we've had credit card services that we've been with for decades. And all of a sudden they do a review and they go, this really happened like 3 years ago that the card company service that we were working with said, we can't service your credit cards anymore. And cannabis companies are going through this all the time still. I'm booked, so I was able to convince another company, my thing is censorship causes blindness. But there's companies, that are, whether it's grow equipment or seeds, or the fact that you can now ship certain cannabis products like CBD interstate because of the Farm Bill, and yet they still have to always deal with banking relationships and being threatened of having that disruption in their business. Ed had that during the Nancy Reagan era, that the Just Say No. All of a sudden, printers wouldn't print his books. And I think that's a real serious warning that we shouldn't put under the rug that a public policy and inflaming the public like that can actually cause serious censorship. His books were about growing cannabis. It wasn't about putting together a ghost gun.
Yes. And you're so right. That is, it can do untold damage to many people who are innocent and also doing creating a benefit. But because there's a perception or misperception on how something works, the tide turns. And yes, we've seen that in a lot of different instances. How about, what about a benefit that's something that's happened in your journey that you were thinking, oh my God, I never in a million years dreamed that this would happen. This is so awesome.
Well, I mean, I still think some of the trial, and the appreciation for the literature and for people's ability to grow their own. I think that's a major contribution. I'm also a hobby gardener of all sorts of plants. I thought it was wonderful, a side effect of the pandemic and people isolating. Our book business soared. Our cannabis growers handbook, because people had the time. I think it's just wonderful that they had the time to be out there and watch a plant grow and care for it, because plants are they can't wait. If they have a bug or a mold, you have to use your eyes and figure out that troubleshooting guide from Ed Rosenthal and solve it.
And that's also healing in and of itself, just digging in the dirt and being with plants and nature. And, in addition to growing something that's beneficial.
No, we have some swag, a magnet goes out. Marijuana may not be addictive, but growing it is.
That's a good one. So, where do people find you? First of all, if they want to order your books and look at your catalog. And then the second part of that is, what if somebody wants to publish? What would they do? So where do we find you in your catalog, your extensive catalog of things we can't wait to read?
Well, that's pretty, we've centralized everything under our star. So it's edrosenthal.com. And we actually, on the website, we have some pretty bodacious things going on. We have a seed giveaway. And you have to, with certain book packages, you get seeds that Ed has been involved in the cultivation. They're not what we call stabilized seeds that you might get and pay for from a seed company. But he encourages what's called pheno hunting. So you plant the seeds and you see this one is taller, or this one had attracted mold. And if you're a serious gardener, then you would take clones from the ones that you like the most. But the seed giveaway, in addition to being encouraging more people to garden, we also give 10% of all sales, not the proceeds, but the off the top sales to the Last Prisoner Project, which is an organization, and you can find them lastprisonerproject.org and donate to them directly. And there are still many people in jail, in prison, for very small marijuana offenses. And this organization is helping getting them out. And it also has grants for when they come out and re-enter. Can you imagine being locked up for 5 years or more and come out to, have lost the opportunity and income, or connecting with your family, or just knowing what social media is all about. So that's one of our bodacious moves that we started last year was the seed giveaway and promoting Last Prisoner Project.
Good for you. I love that word.
Okay. It's a good
one.
And
what about if somebody wants to publish a book? Are you accepting?
Yes, I have to put the caveat out that we're a small company, but they can reach me personally at jane@edrosenthal.com. And I'm open to all suggestions. I'm opening to a bigger publisher that wants to envelop our works and expand on what we're doing. I think Ed has a lot of for audible books, if somebody wants to take him on, I think his Ask Ed knowledge would be very entertaining. But I do have to admit, there's only so much that I can do at this time with Quick American. But please stay in touch with edrosenthal.com or his Instagram handle at edrosenthal420.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay.
And Jane, last but not least, what is it that makes you bodacious? Your unique brand of bodaciousness.
I guess I always felt there was no other way. I just, fortunately, I evolved at a time when my generation was challenging the war in Vietnam. And that segued to challenge the attitude about psychedelics and cannabis. So I think I was just always in my peer group given permission to question. And certainly my husband has augmented that. I think he's one of the original rebels of our time. So he's been very good at mentoring me at speaking up and challenging.
So you've had a little help along the way, but that's it, everyone. This is Jane Klein, born bodacious. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to vent.
Love it.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.